geometry, we have simplifying square roots. And let's get straight into it. Our first square root is the square root of 96. And our goal to this is to get this as simplified as possible. So without knowing too much math, without knowing, all the multiples of 96, we know that 96 at least has, well, we can use math. We can use prior math knowledge. Whenever you have two numbers that added together are a multiple of 3, that this number is going to have a multiple of 3 in it. So what I'm going to do is, we see that we have 6, so I'm going to take out 6, and I'm going to take out 6. So I'm going to do the square root. I'm going to do the square root because we're doing in the square root. So I'm going to take out the square root of 6. Now I'm not going to I'm not going to divide the square root of 96 divided by the square root of, well, that's what I'm going to do. But to find the opposite number to whatever the rest of this number is, I'm going to divide 96 by 6. And whatever number I get, I'm going to put it in a square root. And that number is going to be 16. So, this is what I wanted to say. 6 cannot be reduced any further. There is no perfect square in 6 besides for 1. So it's going to stay like this. So now we have 16. Now, because we know perfect squares, we know that 4 times 4 is 16. And the square root of 16 is going to be 4. So our answer is going to be 4 square root of 6. That's our answer. The next question we have is 216. The square root of 216. We're going to do the exact same thing. We can see that looking at these multiples, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 6 is 9, and the same thing is true when all the numbers added up are a multiple of 9, then we know there's going to be a 9 in here. So let's go ahead and pull the square root of 9 out. So we have the square root of 9. Now 216. Just to let you know, I did all of this before. That's why I'm going over it so quick. But 216 divided by 9 is 24. So we'll have the square root of 24. And we're going to see how much further can we reduce this. We know that there's a perfect 4 in there. A perfect root in there. And we have 4, the square root of 4, and the square root of 6. Okay, now the thing about these two is that 9 is a perfect square and 4 is a perfect square. So we have 3 and we have 2. So just for me, whenever you see me do this, just know that I'm multiplying the two perfect squares together. So you're not thrown off whenever I point to that and come up with the number. So 3 times 2 is going to be 6. But the square root of 6, so our answer is going to be 6 radical 6. That's the answer. Our next question is the square root of 98. Now, I'm going to pull, without any prior knowledge, we know that there is at least a 2 in here. So I'm going to do the square root of 2. I'm going to divide, I'm going to do that a little bit better. The square root of 2. I'm going to divide 98 by 2 and get my other square root, which is going to be square root of 49. Now 49 is a perfect square. 7 times 7 is 49. 2 can't go down any further. So our answer is going to be 7 radical 2. Next, we have the square root of 18. In 18, we know that we have 9. We know 2 times 9 is 18. We know that 3 times 3 is 9, and 2 2 cannot be taken down any further. So our answer is going to be 3 radical 2. Next we have 72, the square root of 72. Make it larger. The square root of 72. Okay, so from prior knowledge, we know that there is a 4 in here. So we're going to go ahead and pull the 4 out. The square root of 4. And then 72 divided by 4 is 18. So our other is the square root of 18. Now, from the last question, we've already dealt with the square root of 18. So we can use the prior knowledge that we learned on the last question to know that right here, we're going to have 3 radical 2, just from prior knowledge of dealing with the previous question. Now this can be taken down to 2. The square root of 4 is 2. So 2 times 3 is going to be 6 radical 2. Now I wanted you to know that I did not multiply this 2 to the 3 and to the 2. This is it's not like it's not distributive property. So our answer is 6 radical 2. Now I want to make something pretty clear before I go any further. So 2 times 3 radical 2 is not 6 radical 4 if it's outside of a radical. If it's inside of a radical, a number outside the radical won't go to it. Now, if this was radical 2, then we will multiply it with inside the radical. If it's inside the radical, they go together. If it's outside the radical, it goes together. Think of it as stay in your lane. You're not going to multiply something by something that it's not connected to. So that answer to the previous question was 6 radical 2. Next we have 144. So with no prior math knowledge, we know that there's at least a 4 in here, a perfect 4 in here. So I'm going to take 4 out, the square root of 4. And 144 divided by 4 is the square root of 36. Now, we know from a couple of previous questions that 6 times 6 is going to be 36. So we can go ahead and do 6 right here. We know the square root of 4 is 2. So we're going to do a 2 here. Just multiply them, and our answer is 12. The square root of 144 is 12. So 144 is a perfect square. That means you can multiply a number by itself, and you can get that number. Next, we have the square root of 45. The square root of 45. We know that there's, without any prior knowledge, we should know at least the basic ones, but we know that there's a 5 in here. So we're going to take the square root of 5. Now, the square root 45 divided by 5 is going to be 9. So the square root of 9 as well. Now, like I said, 5 cannot go any further. It's reduced as far as we can go. Now, in this case, it is a prime number, but also there is no perfect square. Now, if this was 6, it would be the same thing. If this was the square root of 54, we would have 9, which has a perfect square, of course, of 3. So our answer is going to be 3 radical 5. But because there is no perfect square in here, I'm just going to carry it to our answer. Next we have 175. The square root of 175. Okay? Now without any prior knowledge, we know that there's at least 25 in here. No matter how high you go, we know 25, 50, 75, 100. 25, 50, 75, 100. So we know we can at least pull 25 out of here. So we'll do the square root of 25. And then 175 divided by 175 divided by 25 gives us the square root of 7. And there's no perfect square in here. So we're going to pull this 5 out. 5 times 5 is 25. Terms will be 5 radical 7. Next we have the square root of 343. Now, this is not an easy number to dissect. You would think if you did not know, you would attempt to see, can I pull a 3 out of there? We know we cannot pull a 5 out of there, but we can pull a 7. So with your candy dandy calculators, you can divide. I'm going to go ahead and pull the 7 out. So the square root of 7. So I'm going to do 343 divided by 7, which will give me the square root of 49. Now that's a number we're familiar with. We know 7 times 7 is 49. So we're going to do 7 and keep the square root. So 7 radical 7 is our answer for that question. Now we have question 10. The answer is the square root of 12. From prior knowledge, we know that we can get the square root of 4 and the square root of 3 out of here. We know this is going to be 2 radical 3. There's our answer. Now, question 11 is a really interesting question because we're not going to do as much work to it as you would expect. The question for question number 11 is 10 radical 96. Now, we know we see the perfect 10 in there. Now, if you remember, all the way in question 1, we saw the square root of 96. That answer was 4 radical 6. No need to do extra work. We're going to multiply this 10 on the outside by this 4. And our answer is going to be 40 radical 6. Sorry, my makeshift stand is a little janky right now. And then our last question for this assignment, or for this page, I'm going to do the next part in another video, will be 9 with the square root of 245. So I'm not going to worry about this 9 right now. I'm really going to worry about what's in the 245. So without any prior knowledge, I know that there's at least a 5 in there. So I'm going to go ahead and just divide this by 5. So I'm going to bring down here the square root of 5. 245 divided by 5 is the square root of 49. From prior questions, we know that it's going to be 7. And I'm going to put this 5 in front, so it'll be 7 radical 5. But we can't forget this 9 up here, so I'm just going to multiply it here. And our answer is going to be 63 radical 5. There's the murder she wrote. There's the answer. Okay, so I will be back with questions 13 through 24 of this assignment.